Appreciate each of you showing up tonight. Shows a lot of interest in our energy and what's happening here in the state of Colorado. And we look forward to Governor Mark Gordon's comments here this evening with us. Appreciate having him here as our guest and to show how Wyoming is doing it versus what maybe is happening here in Colorado. But we at Common Sense Institute did a research study along with the Payne Institute from the Colorado School of Mines about the energy situation here in Colorado and kind of where we're headed with our cost of energy, and not only for electricity, but for greenhouse gas initiatives here in Colorado and what it's costing our state to deal with that. My name is Charlie McNeil, for those who you don't know me. I think most of you probably do, but I am on the board of Common Sense Institute for the last 15 years, was early on with Earl Wright when Earl co-founded this organization. And we're a nonprofit organization doing research, primarily with what's called a REMI model, which is designed just for the aspects related to Colorado and its economy. And it's very, very accurate with the work that it does. But we do our best to promote Colorado initiatives for free enterprise capitalism and trying to keep our economy strong from that standpoint. I myself am in the coal and oil and gas business. I was talking to the governor earlier about that fact that I've been supplying coal out of Wyoming for the last 25 years to Xcel's power plants in Texas, both down by Lubbock and down by Amarillo, and been doing that for 25 years. And then in oil and gas, I do drill and produce oil and gas in Wyoming, but also in Colorado, North Dakota, and Oklahoma. So I'm really big in fossil fuel generation as still the real power behind our energy in not only Colorado, but the United States. I was talking to the governor earlier too. He's a big advocate of carbon capture and sequestration. So I'm developing a cryogenic approach, actually freezing the CO2 and separating it out of the flue gases. But anyways, the CO2 capture is a way to keep our coal-fired generation and gas-fired generation viable. Because right now, under the Biden administration, Rule 111D was enacted, which says by 2032, all coal-fired power plants and gas-fired plants have to have carbon capture and sequestration, or they have to shut down. Here in Colorado, we'll be shutting down in 2030. We'll have no more coal-fired generation, so it could be all renewables is where the government will have us heading. So good time to buy a generator at some point here, that's all I can say. So what we're really here to talk about also is the executive order which President Trump signed back in mid-April here. And many of you are aware of this executive order. It's Executive Order 14241, and it reads, if I can read it here, immediate measures to increase American mineral production. And so it's aimed at strengthening the United States supply of critical minerals and addressing associated national security concerns. And a lot of those national security concerns is also our energy security concerns. And so with the state of Wyoming, many of you might not know, but over half of our coal produced and supplied in the United States for generation of power, electric power, comes from the state of Wyoming. So it's a critical resource that we've got to figure out how to maintain. Under the Biden administration, they also made it so the BLM was forbidden to provide any more leases, federal leases of coal reserves, which is the lifeblood of that coal production in Wyoming and to our power generation in the United States. So that's the kind of forces that we're dealing with that we've got to try to reverse, especially with the increase in power needs for data centers and AI that you've all heard about. I mean, our power needs are on an increase that's unbelievable. We've pretty much never experienced this kind of increase in power demand. So we need to keep all sources of our energy viable, including our coal-fired and gas-fired power plants. So with that tonight, we're going to talk about that along too with the critical minerals that comes with it. And Wyoming has got a number of critical minerals, rare earth minerals that could be mined along with uranium, along with oil and gas, along with coal. It's a very rich state in all of the important minerals that are needed under this executive order that President Trump put forth. So with that, CSI has joined up with the Payne Institute of the Colorado School of Mines to put forward this research that we've done on the critical mineral aspects under this executive order. And so we're going to be talking about that here tonight, and we'll have plenty of time left too for question and answer on that, along with a question and answer period we're going to have with the governor. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Caitlin McKinney. She's Director of Research at the Common Sense Institute, and she's going to come up here and present the findings of the research along with the panel, introducing our panel that's going to have further discussions on that. So with that, let's get on with our presentation tonight and look forward to your questions, and hopefully we can answer them, and look forward to a vibrant discussion. Thank you again.
Put my water right here. Just hope everything's okay. Hi, everyone. We've been so excited for this event, and what a great turnout. We're also live streaming it today, so we can have an even bigger audience than the people in this room, which there's a lot of us here. As Charlie mentioned, I am Caitlin McKinney, the Director of Research at the Common Sense Institute. And for those of you who might not be too familiar with the Common Sense Institute, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit economic think tank, and we really try to shed light on the issues that Coloradans deem are the most important in our state. And for those of you who also might not know, we're also expanding. This is the 15th year of CSI, and we have expanded into Arizona, and over the last 2 years, we've also expanded into Iowa and Oregon. So we are growing and pretty rapidly. Now, before I get into the fun data stuff today, I would like to acknowledge our board of directors, which we believe there are several of you in the audience today. So could our board members please stand? We really appreciate all of your support. We also have a set of bipartisan policy fellows, and their expertise and experience really helps us make our work and research just that much stronger. After our last Eggs in the Economy, we had John Kellner join on our team, and he is going to be mainly working with Chief Paul Pazin and Mitch Morrissey on all things crime research. So we're really excited to have John on. And I would also be remiss if I didn't give a big thank you to Governor Gordon for being with us today. Thank you so much for making the trek down. We're so happy to have you, and we cannot wait for your speaking engagement and all of your amazing insights. So thank you very much. So today I'm going to be presenting some key findings from our latest energy paper. It will be published today, and its idea basically gave rise to this event, so we're very proud of it. Before I go into the results, I would like to give a big thank you to our co-authors. They helped me write this, they helped immensely with writing this report, Dr. Ian Lange and Trevor Lewis. Could you please stand up, and can everyone help give a big round of applause to them? They are very amazing. And basically the idea for this EO, similar to what Charlie had mentioned, this mineral EO was signed in April by the White House, and it basically expedites permitting processes for mineral mining in the US so that we can have a larger, more stable domestic supply of minerals and to stop leaning so heavily on importation. So we looked at economic impacts across 3 different states, Colorado, Wyoming, and Arizona. And for Colorado, we wanted to know what the economic impact would be of one additional mine along the Uravan mineral belt And this is in southwestern Colorado, and it's very rich in uranium, which is a key input in nuclear production, and also vanadium, which is a critical mineral that's largely used for batteries and energy storage. So we projected out to 2040 and found that by 2040, the economic impact with this, with population growth, it would increase Colorado's population growth by more than 5,000, increase its labor force by more than 3,000, and increase the statewide GDP by about 1.3 billion. We also looked at job creation numbers, and so we found that I like to move around a lot, sorry. If you open up one individual mine in 2026, we can see job growth start to peak in 2029, and then marginally decrease, but still having positive impacts out to 2040. And we separated this by both total new job creation, which is in the blue line, and total new private sector creation in the red. And this comes at a very important time when we've been seeing upticks in unemployment in Colorado and downticks in private sector job growth. We also believe that the EO has spurred more nuanced statewide energy legislation, in particular bipartisan House Bill 251040, which was signed by Governor Polis a few months ago. I can't remember the exact date, but it basically said that nuclear production is now going to be considered a clean energy technology in Colorado. And this comes at a pivotal time when we're still receiving about 1/3 of our energy generation from coal-fired power plants. And Colorado, says that they're committed to phasing out coal by 2030. Oops. So we also looked at the economic impacts of nuclear production in Colorado. So this would be statewide economic impacts. And the job growth trend is very similar to the figure that you saw in the previous slide, where we see job growth spiking in 2029 and then falling out, but still having positive impacts out to 2040. When we looked at different economic impact indicators, we see a population growth of over 54,000, a labor force growth of nearly 31,000, and GDP growth of roughly 7.8 billion. When we looked at the impact of Wyoming, we believe that the EO is expected to really accelerate the development of Wyoming's rare earth mineral deposits. And rare earth mineral deposits, specifically neodymium, which I had to spell out word by word, which is very prevalent in Wyoming, is also used to help wind generation and produce magnets, which is critical for defense. Currently, there are 3 large projects that are mining rare earth elements in Wyoming. These include Bear Lodge, Halleck Creek, and Brook Mine. And Bear Lodge is particularly interesting because it's on federal land, making it so that this project can be immediately receiving benefits from the EO passing. Now, when we think of copper production and what states in the U.S., we usually think of Arizona. Arizona produces over 70% of the nation's copper, and similar to House Bill 1040, Arizona passed FAST 41, which was a response to the EO to basically accelerate permitting status for Resolution Copper, which is a very large copper project. And when it is at its full momentum, it has the potential to supply about 25% of annual US copper demand. And so we wanted to model the impacts of copper production in Colorado, I'm so used to saying Colorado, in Arizona. So we built out a linear regression. Our equation for this is at the top of this table, where our outcome variable is county-wide wages in a copper-producing county in Arizona during year T. Beta 1 is associated with our coefficient of interest, and it's linked to a copper-producing county in Arizona and the global price of copper. And because the global price of copper is not is independent of local economic impacts, we claim that we make the argument that this is exogenous, which lets us, argue that our results are very valid. This table shows our regression output. So this 11.11 is our coefficient of interest, and it's significant at the 95% level. And I know a lot of people in this room are saying, what the heck does that mean? Well, this basically translates into a $1 increase in the global price of copper per pound is equal to an $11 rise in average weekly wages at the county level for a copper producing county in Arizona. And this reflects a 1.5% increase in community income. So now that I saturated the room with lots and lots of heavy data, I think that this sets the stage for our panelists and our Q&A. I am going to be reading off my notes because we have such a stellar group of people with amazing backgrounds, and I don't want to miss anything. So one by one, I'll be reading out bios, and when I say your name, please come to the stage. Our first being Vince Bezdek. He's going to be our moderator today. Vince is the executive editor of the Denver Gazette and Colorado Springs Gazette. He formerly worked for the Washington Post and the Denver Post and has written 2 political books. He also writes a weekly column for the Gazette. Our next panelist is Lynn Granger. Lynn is the president and CEO of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, known as COGA. Prior to joining COGA, Lynn served as regional director at the American Petroleum Institute, which is known as API, and executive director of API in Colorado. Our next panelist is Adam Eckman. Adam has been the president and CEO of the Colorado Mining Association since 2023. He brings significant experience in the mining industry, having advocated for its legal, regulatory, and legislative interests as Associate General Counsel for the National Mining Association. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Ian Lange. Dr. Lange is a professor of economics at the Colorado School of Mines, a faculty fellow at the Payne Institute, and director of the Mineral and Energy Economics Graduate Program. He is also a longtime mentor and friend of mine. So Vince, I'm going to ask you to take it away, and please will you join me in giving our moderator and our panelists a big round of applause.
Can I use this? Can you guys hear me all right? I got a little tiny mic here that, uh-oh. Is that gonna work? Oh, is that you? That might be. Oh, good. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Adam, Lynn, and Dr. Ian for being here. And thanks to the Common Sense Institute, especially. For us at the Denver Gazette, it's like having 25 extra investigative reporters that I can call anytime on any topic in the state, and they usually set me straight. So I really appreciate being part of this. I also appreciate all of you coming out early so we can go later and see the Nuggets extract a win from Oklahoma. So I appreciate that. Appreciate the timing. We're here because on April 13th, in reaction to President Trump's tariffs, China suspended exports of a wide range of critical minerals and rare earth metals, threatening to choke off supplies of components used by automakers, aerospace manufacturers, semiconductor companies, and military contractors. 2 days later, the White House issued the executive order that this report is focused on to immediately spur an increase in U.S. mineral production in response. So we want to talk about that executive order and sort of the energy and mining picture in general in Colorado. So Adam, I'm going to start with you. And I wonder if you could just, before we get into the executive order, kind of give us a picture of what the current state of mining is in Colorado. And if you could help me explain the difference between critical minerals and rare earth minerals, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Vince, for the question. And I want to start by thanking the Common Sense Institute for hosting this outstanding conversation that comes at a very poignant time for our state and for our nation. I also want to thank Lynn with Toga and Dr. Lange with Colorado School of Mines. We've got a great group to talk about this tonight. And the state of mining in Colorado is one that's in flux, and it's one that has a bright future. Colorado, unlike several other mining states, has a very diverse mineral endowment. We, for years, had one of the highest producing coal states. We still produce quite a bit of coal, though, as Caitlin talked about at the outset, we are on a glide path to close a good number of our coal fleet by 2030. Fortunately, a lot of our coal mines enjoy robust export markets, so coal mining is not going away. We also are the nation's leader in molybdenum production. Molybdenum is a key mineral that is used in steel alloys. It's principally responsible for making stainless steel stainless, along with chromium. So we produce more of that than anybody else and use it in a variety of applications. We also produce gold, and we have, as Caitlin mentioned, rich reserves of uranium and vanadium on the west slope of Colorado. Those reserves could come into play as Colorado faces its power supply problem, and we try to figure out how to fill the third that's currently powered by coal in 5 years. This is a significant problem that we've created for ourselves. We at the Colorado Mining Association believe that we should fix the problem we created by using Colorado uranium reserves to provide carbon-free energy. With respect to your more technical question about critical minerals and rare earth minerals, everybody wants to talk about these days for good reason. They are sort of the linchpin for advanced technologies, particularly as it pertains to clean energy and national defense applications. China controls about 80% of production of critical minerals and rare earths, about 90% of processing. And as you mentioned, Vince, they turn the spigot off whenever they want something, and the rest of the world has to deal with that. So we're very grateful to see this EO. Rare earths are a separate category of minerals from critical minerals. I think Ian would probably be better positioned to explain all the nuances between those two lists. But the bottom line is there are lists that are developed based on the perceived sensitivity of the supply chain, where you can get it and what it's used for. And the executive order that we're here to talk about tonight not only focuses on the existing U.S. Geological Survey lists, but also expand those lists to include copper and uranium in addition to a number of other minerals for purposes of its implementation. So it's an exciting time for Colorado and for the West in mining. I think there's a lot of good ground that we can break, and look forward to talking more about it tonight.
And molybdenum, that's just fun to say, right?
Yeah.
Okay, with this executive order, what do you think are the implications for our state? Is this good news for our state?
I think this is great news for our state. This is really designed to streamline some of the bureaucracy that has held up a lot of our proposed mining projects over the years and could significantly expedite the permitting process. Case in point, there's an exploration project in La Plata County, appropriately called the La Plata Project, which is a combination deposit of copper, gold, silver, platinum products, but also critical minerals and rare earths. So it's pretty much everything that we're talking about all in one unique geologic feature. It's 90% on Forest Service lands, so federally managed lands, where this executive order would most come into play, and that could drastically expedite NEPA review, the environmental review. It could better coordinate the relevant agencies that need to look at it, and it could take that mining process from over 10 years to move from exploration to production to maybe as short as, say, 4 years. I mean, it could
Really?
cut it in half.
Because I was wondering how long this would all take, but you think in 4 years,
Well,
this could make a difference?
Optimistically. I mean, there are other elements involved here, and one that I think that everybody in this room and in Colorado needs to pay attention to is we have positive things happening on the federal level, but we also have state and local challenges. And Colorado.
That's my next question.
Yes. Okay. So sorry to jump ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But if we can align our state priorities with what we know to be our national economic and national security interests, yeah, I think we can cut the process by probably half.
That's great. So do you think our governor will jump into this and help support this? Do I think our state government will help this?
I certainly hope so. And one bright point on the need for minerals is sort of foreshadowed by what Caitlin mentioned with respect to nuclear energy being designated as a clean energy fuel. That legislation, and this is for purposes of municipal financing, it puts nuclear on the same footing as wind and solar for financing purposes. This was introduced in the 2024 legislative session, had one Republican sponsor on the bill, didn't make it out of committee, just died immediately there. This year, had 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, sailed through the House, sailed through the Senate, and Governor Polis signed it in a matter of weeks. And this shows how dramatically the attitude towards nuclear is shifting. And a lot of the hearings on that bill centered on uranium mining. And so I think people are coming around to it. I think it's certainly something that Governor Polis could understand the benefit from with respect to solving the energy problem that the state has created with the greenhouse gas roadmap. And it's also something Coloradans should get behind because of the end user companies. I mean, minerals is the backbone of aerospace. Colorado is the largest aerospace employment state in the nation. We have a real interest in responsibly mining the minerals to feed the advanced technologies we make right here, and that Governor Polis supports, and that a good deal of our legislators support.
You know, that shift on nuclear seems like a huge shift to me. The utilities director in Colorado Springs said there's no way they can meet these goals without nuclear. He said that. Do you think that's true?
I think it's going to be very difficult. It's a real math problem. Obviously, there's an effort to ramp up wind and solar as quickly as we can. Colorado Mining Association we believe in all of the above. There's certainly a place for that. But filling a third in 5 years with wind and solar, when they've not even considered, publicly the litigation challenge with transmission projects, to transmit that, I think that's overly ambitious. I think that it's going to be an all hands on deck approach. Obviously, natural gas is going to play a role, and I think we have to look to nuclear to meet this need.
Adam, you segued to my question for Lynn perfectly. Lynn, thank you for that. What about the clean energy plan? How does that dovetail with all of this that we're talking about, the executive order and sort of the energy picture in the state right now? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've been calling it the clean energy hope in the last few weeks instead of the clean energy plan, simply because for those of you not familiar, we saw a 64-page document released by Governor Polis's administration maybe 3 to 4 weeks before session ended, dubbed the Clean Energy Plan, basically kind of moving all of our 2050 goals up to 2040. The Colorado Energy Office has been working on this 64-page plan for about 2 years, but failed to stakeholder the plan with anybody, energy producers, utilities, anyone. And so got obviously a lot of opposition in the last few weeks. So that clean energy plan did not turn into formal legislation for this year. However, we fully expect it to return next year. The governor's office has committed to a robust stakeholder process, which will probably commence sometime this summer or this fall. So we don't know what this clean energy plan, I think, will look like going into the 2026 legislative session. But again, I think it's another example of just very ambitious goals that are not right now realistic, which is why I am calling it a hope instead of a plan. And again, I think to Adam's point, there's really great initiatives going on out there that we hope that our governor would get behind, but I'm not super optimistic. I think one of the executive orders that we are focused on at COGA that I think kind of dovetails with this executive order is a direction to the DOJ to look at state regulatory overreach. I think there are clearly a handful of states that particular executive order is directed at. I think Colorado can absolutely be one of those, and we will be compiling some regulations that we think would be ripe for that particular executive order as well.
Great. Thanks for mentioning that other executive order. Dr. Ian, we're here in Colorado, and I know the governor will speak about Wyoming soon, but can you briefly touch on the implications for this executive order for Arizona in your report? You're one of the authors of the report. I'm hoping you could speak directly to that.
Oh, definitely. So the state of Arizona has numerous mineral deposits, as was mentioned already. They've been the top copper producer for as long as we could find data on it. And they have a number of projects that are in the works, as I think was already mentioned here. Resolution Copper has been in the works for a long time. The large project could supply a lot of the copper needed in the United States. And the executive order specifically asked for projects to be nominated to the Federal Permit Steering Improvement Committee, which basically tries to coordinate and expedite federal permitting across all government agencies. For those not aware, generally, if you're going to permit a mine, you would touch something like Army Corps of Engineers, Environmental Protection Agency, and let's say like BLM or U.S. Forest Service. And so what Congress recognized in, I think, 2015 or 16 was sort of that it's really hard to coordinate across all those, and permits get lost. If any of you are familiar with Rare Element Resources, the deposit in Wyoming, we have one of my colleagues was the the chief financial officer while they were trying to get that open or permitted, we'll say, in 2013 and 14. And yeah, every 6 months they would check in and people would be like, oh, what's going on with your permit, right? And so this FAST 41, this Federal Permanent Steering Improvement Committee, is trying to expedite and move that along faster so that you get a decision faster. And it was announced probably 2 weeks ago that Resolution Copper, one of the big copper deposits in Arizona, was one of the first projects brought onto FAST 41 status, which again is what the executive order had asked for. So moving forward quickly with some of these large projects in Arizona will obviously be beneficial to the mineral and we'll say national security of the United States.
Great. Let me circle back to Colorado.
Okay.
A couple of things really jumped out in your report for me, and that was some of the economic impacts of mining along the Uravan mineral belt. And you describe population growth, job growth, GDP growth, which are pretty dramatic. Can you? Why do you see that happening? What would drive that in the next few years?
Well, certainly it's sort of like an injection of economic activity into an area that otherwise did not have that kind of economic activity. I mean, I would say more generally, right, the hope with a lot of these programs to encourage mining would be to bring economic activity into areas that had been sort of left behind, whether that be through lack of broadband internet or just lack of transportation options. And so as you bring economic activity in there, you sort of catalyze all these other things that are required to really accelerate in the modern economy.
That's great. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of global mining picture right now, if you don't mind. Where has mineral production grown and where has it shrunk in the last 10 years, kind of around the world? Can you give us that picture real quick?
Yeah, well, certainly, as Adam, I think, alluded to a little bit, probably 20, 30 years ago, the Chinese government really focused on dominating sort of the midstream, the processing part of mining. And as a result, they've also went and looked for deposits that they can own or sort of operate to what they would like to see in their industrial economy. And so some of that's inside China, some of that's outside China, like in Africa. And so that's been a place where, there's been a lot more mining, there's been a lot more activity. And certainly Europe and the United States, you might say the OECD economies have seen relative contraction. Canada and Australia maybe being an exception there. They have rather large mining industries in Canada and Australia.
Kind of related to that, this executive order, who do you think it'll benefit the most? I mean, is Colorado going to be one of the chief beneficiaries, or is Wyoming, Arizona, California? What do you think?
Well, I don't, actually, I should have thought of this ahead of time, but there is a very nice map on USGS's webpage of Tier 1 mineral deposits. They basically map out the Rockies. So Arizona,
Rockies,
Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, right, is where all these Tier 1 mineral deposits are, according to the USGS. And so that's the kind of activity we hope to or expect to see happening. Yeah.
So we're right at the center of all of this right now.
Right.
Yeah. You had something you want to say?
No.
Last question. We got to close this up, guys. I will say, if you have questions for our panelists, save them until after Governor Gordon's fireside chat, and we'll do them all at once, okay? We'll try to tackle them all together. All right, last question. You wrote this report, you helped write this report. What, Dr. Ian, are the things that kind of surprise you the most about findings about mining right now?
Well, I think we sort of expected there to be a lot happening in Wyoming with this sort of rare earth supply chain that it looks like they can build out, and sort of the knock-on effects that might come from that, I would say, are very exciting for a state like Wyoming.
Great, thank you much. Let's give a hand to our panelists, guys. Thank you very much, guys. Now we're going to bring up the governor from Wyoming, Governor Gordon. Yeah, grab a chair. Well, Governor Gordon, great to have you here. Governor Gordon and I share a very dear friend, Senator Al Simpson, up in Wyoming, who we just had memorial services for and said goodbye to up in Wyoming He had a good run and a humorous run, I would say. Kept us all laughing and kept us all kind of using humor to grease the skids of politics, which is not an easy thing to do. So great to have you here. Governor Gordon, let's just jump right in. You know, I'd like to ask you about your priorities as a governor in terms of energy, but also your other priorities, just so we can kind of compare and contrast your approach in Wyoming to our approach in Colorado. Would you mind starting there?
Sure. No, I'm happy to. I like Dr. Ian. Thank you very much for your boost of confidence to Wyoming. We love the fact that this is all going to happen here. I got to say, for me, this is an area of the country that we just talked about how many minerals are here, how much energy production is here, what a great opportunity it is for this region of the country. And I'll put Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana in that loop. And so for me, it's been how do we make sure that we get, how do we make sure we have a strong economy? How do we make sure we have a great education system? How do we make sure that this is the leader going forward, this area? Now, there's going to be some differences of opinion. I get that. That's probably healthy and valuable.
Yeah.
As I was listening to some of the conversation here a little bit earlier, I was thinking about the fact that Western governors, which is mostly that region, have had flip-flopping leadership, Democrat to Republican, along the way. And I will say that Governor Polis's initiative was geothermal. My initiative was how do we decarbonize? And now let me be clear about decarbonizing. It really was about how do we make sure we preserve coal, oil and gas, these industries, these things that have meant so much to our wealth, that have meant so much to our standard of living. And how do we, instead of saying we're going to regulate ourselves into oblivion, how do we provide an opportunity for innovation to be able to lead to the kinds of things that we really want to see? And I look at this region as being able to provide that, not only in workforce, but in intellectual leadership. And so to me, it's been how do we unleash that? How do we make sure that we have that opportunity going forward?
Do you see some opportunity for regional collaboration? Is that what we're talking about?
I do, and you and I didn't really have a chance to talk about this, but we just came back from a trade mission to Taiwan and Japan. It is fascinating because 90% of the processing of rare earths is done by China. Not a friendly neighborhood for Japan or Taiwan. They're very anxious to see how they can grow their technological opportunities. And in doing so, they're looking to investing in the United States. They're looking to finding ways to be able to help. This is the other thing, everybody's talking about tariffs and what tariffs might mean. I used to work for Apache Oil, and talking to some of my old colleagues, a lot of concern about what tariffs could mean for tubing and things like that. We understand that.
Yeah.
But the opportunities to be able to rebalance the trade deficit by buying U.S. energy is enormous. And that's where this region of the country is really well poised, not only in mineral production, but in energy production as well. So then how do we facilitate that growth?
Yeah.
We do it better, we do it safer, we do it with better environmental protection than anywhere else in the world. And so we just need to celebrate that.
Are there national security implications there if we do get involved with more countries or export more energy? Are there any worries there?
Well, when you have 80% of the critical minerals and rare earths that are already under sort of Chinese domination, and 90% of the production, in China,
Yeah.
and you've seen what they've done in terms of expanding into Africa and other places like that. You understand there are security implications right now. So if you have,
They're happening now.
They're happening right now.
Yeah.
And we see that, and we see how fragile it is that our national security. So this is a great time for us to be able to double down and reinvest in what Wyoming, what Colorado, what Arizona, Utah can do, which is one of the things that Governor Cox of Utah, Governor Little, and I all signed a memorandum on the other day. And then regionally, we've been talking about how do we, everybody talks about Texas or Alaska as these big behemoths of energy production. You look at this area of the country, we can get it done. We have the infrastructure. Yeah, we should upgrade it, but there's nothing holding us back except for the fact that we have regulatory structures that take too damn long.
Are those the biggest barriers, you think?
I believe so. Yeah, well, we have blockades against, out of the country on the west. We almost had a lawsuit for the Millennium Bulk Terminal, which was a coal terminal. About 20% of it could be used for coal. There's gas opportunities there. There are other things, the commodities that could be exported out of there. It's a brownfield site. It's a great port. We had ready to go, gone through the Justice Department in the Trump administration for a Commerce Clause. Because if you've got Jay Inslee of Washington saying, I'd rather export apples than Wyoming coal, to me, that's a Commerce Clause issue.
Yeah, right,
So.
right. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, if we did more of this here at home in the Rocky Mountain West, we'd have fewer national security worries.
I believe so.
Is that right?
I do believe so.
Yeah.
And let me take a moment to talk about regulation. When NEPA was first put into effect, and that was about the time Al Simpson was put into office, NEPA was actually a pretty good law. I mean, it's, you sit there and you say, what could happen?
Could you explain NEPA to our audience?
So NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, not the Protection Act, but the National Environmental Policy Act. And it was designed to sort of analyze what the impacts of a given action would be. And initially, as it was conceived, I think one could argue that the reason the Alaska pipeline worked so well was because we took time to think about it. It didn't take forever, and we didn't have all the legal things that have happened in NEPA since then to make it extrapolate out to this incredibly long thing where Phil Anschutz is building the largest wind farm in the country in Wyoming, but it's taken 12 years to get permitting, 12 years. So if you're gonna go carbon neutral or phase out anything by 2030, figure that the permitting is gonna take you well past that 5 year. That's gotta stop.
Yeah.
Millennium Bulk Terminal was originally an aluminum smelter. It was put together during World War II in about 1.5 years. It took 4 years just to do scoping on it. And then all the legal challenges just grew out. That's what's really paralyzing our country now. And I don't think, I bet anybody in this room, if you ask them, do they care about the environment, they would also, but let's do that. How many people care about the environment in this room? How many people don't? Gee.
That would be zero, by the way.
So I think we have a commonality of objective, which is to do things the right way. And if we give ourselves the opportunity to do that, and we have a regulatory structure that rewards that, best available technology to me is one of those ceilings that we should just get rid of. We should have outcomes that we expect. And if you can achieve that more economically, if you can achieve that more efficiently, hooray, that's fantastic. But if you're saying, you've developed this technology, we're going to put it to everybody. These are the things that we've done to ourselves that slow projects down. We're talking about some of the deposits on federal national forest lands. You've got two agencies. The minerals are handled by the Bureau of Land Management. The Forest Service is over the top of it. You probably, if it's on rare earths, you're talking about the NRC that's also got to be involved. Who knows who else is, probably DOE as well. So Wyoming is building the first advanced nuclear plant in a long time in Kemmerer.
That's the Bill Gates project?
It's the Bill Gates project. It's a it's a sodium cooled reactor. It has not one, not two, not three, not 4 or 5 or 6. It's got 7 individual NEPA analyses that have to be done by different agencies. This is stupid. You all know that. And so, it's great the EOs have kind of sort of cleared a little bit of the debris, But we have work to do underneath that to streamline and make more efficient. One of the things that we've been recommending is on forest plans, not do a NEPA analysis. I mean, the forest plan itself is a NEPA analysis, but then it's done again. So are there ways that we can make this more efficient? Now, Wyoming is very driven to have things come online quickly. So one of the things that we've been talking about is if the federal government can't get the job done on time, and I will say the last administration, I think, was cynical about the courts. They figured we will throw up all kinds of impediments. People will bring it to the courts. The courts will take forever to solve the issue, and by that time, the problem's going to be gone. I think that was devastating to our economy. What I've been suggesting is that our states have the ability, if the feds can't get the project analyzed on time, that the states can step in and do that. Now the question is, okay, you're going to court, and do you have the resources as a state to stand up to all that litigation? That's where I think you come back to the federal government and you say, you have to stand behind the state, which gives an impetus to the federal government to get the job done. But it also says if it's not going to get done, the states are going to do it, but you're going to have to stand behind it. We've just got to do this because you're looking at rare earth resources, the Bear Lodge deposit. 2014 is when you got started on some of that project. And it's still not in production. They've got some of the siting done and they're looking at the mining. They've looked at the samples. It is very exciting. And that's the kind of thing that Japan and others are saying, look, we would love to help in doing the infrastructure around it. But if it's going to be 15 years, we're not going to get it done.
You're kind of known as the all of the above governor, because you've got a nuclear project going, you've got oil and gas, you've got natural gas, you've got coal, and you've got this giant wind farm that my boss is building, by the way. So I hear a lot about that. So it seems to me you would agree that clean energy projects we've got to get faster at too. That's part of the equation.
Absolutely. In fact, actually, the Biden administration, when I took over as the chair of Western Governors, said, we'd love you to take on as the initiative streamlining permitting, because we just aren't getting anything done on time. Then the issue became, okay, but you got to streamline it on green energy projects and not on anything else. Well, that doesn't work.
Right.
We're picking winners and losers, and obviously everybody kind of fell down. So I think it is bipartisan, the desire to make this work better. But for green energy, and it is sort of interesting. Wyoming is, I think, 10th, but we're coming on strong. What we're starting to hear is what happened to my view. I used to have these dark skies that were so fabulous. Now they're red, they're off, they're red, they're off. What's the cost to me in that? And I think you're starting to hear that in other places. When we were in Taiwan, which has made commitments to phase out coal as well, they're now admitting that a portion of their portfolio is going to be still coal production. They want to see low sulfur coal from the Powder River Basin over the stuff they get out of Indonesia or out of Australia, which is much dirtier. They want to see natural gas. We have natural gas that we can produce out of Jonah that meets all the UN standards. They can get carbon credits. We're well positioned to be able to take advantage of this marketplace. But even in Taiwan, they're saying we just can't do it with renewables alone.
Right. Can't do it by itself. Speaking of coal, could you speak to how carbon capture might help keep coal mines open?
Sure.
Will that occur in Wyoming, do you think?
Well, I was thinking about quoting Dick Lamb, who I heard years ago talking about how he got elected to oppose a particular interstate or highway. And he said, so I did that, and then the voters gave me the victory signal one finger at a time. So I've kept that quote. Wyoming back in the 1990s started talking about what's the framework that we need to establish to understand pore space and what happens with CO2. So we've been at this a very, very long time. Correspondingly, it also helped to obviate against the Obama administration doing what they did with airspace and saying, we're going to take all the groundwater and we'll handle it, thanks.
Really?
But we already had that framework in place, which helped us. Since then, Basin and Wyoming and I think Tri-State's a little bit in it too, have put a significant sort of pilot plant infrastructure in place on the Dry Fork power plant. You can take carbon dioxide off of an emission stream, and so we have Kawasaki Heavy Industries and MTR that have both done demonstrations there for carbon capture. There's a cost associated with it, everything else, and I think that's one of the big concerns. Oh. But the fact of the matter is, we can do this.
We can.
And I think there is a commitment to do it, and we know that technology will get less expensive as we move forward. And yes, will it keep coal there? Yes, I think, I would argue that most everyone in this room, and I think most everyone recognizes the importance of baseload power. They understand that we can do it better and we can do it cleaner. And in fact, if we really were serious about carbon capture and we put biomass in with the mix on the burn and all that sort of stuff, we actually could be carbon negative, which is something that I've talked about, because you can capture the carbon and you can get forests to grow, because dead and dying forests aren't a carbon sink the way live growing forests are. So being able to better manage our forests, being able to do that in power plants, all of that makes a lot of sense. These are ways that we can address that issue. I think if people start to really think about what is our end result, what are we going to do, we can get that done. I think there are certain policies. Charlie, you and I were talking a little bit about how do we, if we desire to have a carbon neutral future, who pays for that? And how do we disperse that? What are the costs that are associated with that? And if those are truly objectives we have, is it fair to put all of that cost on simply the producers?
Right. Well, listen, I'm going to turn it over to our audience for a bit here, maybe for about 10 minutes. Thank you for those answers, and see if we can take some questions from the audience.
One back there.
Right there. We're going to bring you a microphone, okay?
Just 1 second. I'll wait and grab a microphone for you.
So in a state like Colorado, where we have, let's say, just a divergence of opinion on clean energy versus other options, what talking points can you create when you have an audience that is much more clean energy, meaning wind and solar or nothing? What talking points can you create to kind of appeal to their main interest, but also their common sense, to bring them to make them realize that other energy sources are not the enemy?
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And I think there are 3 primary talking points. One is, can you get there by renewables alone? And no, you can't. Second is that, I went to 60 Minutes, 2 years ago, and I said, why don't you look at what Wyoming's doing across the front? We were talking about if we want to be carbon neutral or even carbon negative, what are the technologies most likely to get us there at the same time that we don't reduce our standard of living? And we had a good conversation. In fact, your boss, and that project was featured in it, but we also talked about carbon capture and other things. That spurred a backlash in my state that apparently I was trying to take out coal, which I obviously wasn't. And it ended up with a really dumb bill, which was called Let's Make Carbon Dioxide Great Again, in which they were calling for more and more carbon dioxide. Luckily, that didn't pass. But I mean, there's some of this stuff that's a little bit stupid as we go through, which is why Common Sense, this institute, weighs in so seriously, because, and the last point I'd make was I used to serve on the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, and there was an energy conference that Kansas City and Dallas both do, and Alice Jackson was speaking when she was CEO of XL Colorado. And she made a point about how aggressively XL Energy was pursuing green energy, and all the great things that they were doing with solar and wind and so on and so forth. In 2019, you may remember in March and April, we had this huge storm. And this happened a little bit after that. And her point was that if we didn't have Comanche, a coal plant, now you've got 2 of them retired, 1 left, but if we didn't have Comanche, we would not have been able to provide electricity. And what I wish she had said publicly, I understand why she didn't, but she said, if we can't provide electricity, people die. So being honest about what this is, common sense, honesty, and can you actually get it done? These are things that I think are all good talking points.
We have another question.
Vince, this is a question to you. The Comanche power plant in Pueblo, through executive order under Ritter, will be mothballed in 2030. It produces 20% of the revenue for the Pueblo school system and the hospital system. What is the plan? Pueblo is the poorest community in Colorado of that size by 1.5 times. What's the plan to produce that revenue to keep the school systems and the hospitals open?
I'm really glad I'm not your governor. Honestly, I don't know. I will tell you what Alice also said at that point. She said, we've got to have Comanche going forward. Now, you're talking about nuclear power coming into the mix, because I think everybody understands that distributable base load power is absolutely essential. If you're talking about wind generation, you know what's really astounding to me, and these are never quoted in those analyses, you have to have about a 30% overbuild in wind generation just to provide what you're planning. So that means you've got to add a lot more investment in stuff that's just idle, because you might need it if you have a different set of circumstances. So when you talk about the economic analysis of these things, to your point, what is funding the schools and all those things is the mineral production. And in fact, Governor Lujan Grisham of New Mexico and I kept doing this. We did it in Congress, we did it to the Biden administration. We said, look, it's our oil and gas production, it's our mineral production that is educating our kids. You're killing that. You've got to have more reasonable approach to this. So, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't have a solution, but I'd say I'd make a lot of noise about it.
Another question.
Thank you, Governor. I'm getting a little bit confused. What is the difference between carbon capture and CO2 sequestration? I have always felt that carbon dioxide is the gas of life for plants and that we really need it. Could you please speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, your point about plants, one of the greatest carbon capture plants that we have are our national forests. They take carbon dioxide and they turn it into fiber. That's awesome. And we can do more with that. But there are also technologies. So in the case of Kawasaki Heavy Industries, their carbon capture is a chemical process using amine that is able to capture the carbon, which you can then do something with, or MTR, which is a membrane-based, doesn't use the kind of water that the amine process does. But once you have the CO2, there's a ton of things you can do with it. One of them is you can put it in enhanced oil recovery, which we don't recover very much out of the primary effort to recover oil. You have secondary and tertiary recovery that can just do so much more in terms of taking those existing fields and getting more life out of them. And some of that is then considered carbon sequestration, meaning that the carbon is now sequestered in the ground. There's also geologic sequestration. which Iceland is doing a little bit. They're trying to inject it underground, and then through a chemical process over time, it begins to turn into rocks and other things. We're talking about the possibility of cryogenic sequestration. So one is capturing the CO2, however you do that, whether it be biologic or mechanical. And the other is, what do you do with the CO2 once you had that? And one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is how we can then take that CO2 and make it into something even more valuable. One of the things that is sort of a quest there is there something that we can do with CO2 to turn it into so-called sustainable aviation fuel?
We have time, I think, for one more question. Right back here.
Governor, I can't think of a better backdrop for you to discuss energy policy than common sense. May you continue to lead Wyoming, because I think it'll lead our country. I was hoping I could throw a softball to you. And because we have educators here, we have people in business, and I'm familiar with what you have done for new innovative companies in Wyoming with your grant programs and with other support that you provided, and DISA Technologies did not pay me to bring this up.
Wow. Well, I think you can tell I'm very enthusiastic about what can happen, and I'm really encouraged by working across boundaries with Colorado and other states, because I honestly think the solutions are right in front of us. So one of the things that we've tried to do from the education standpoint, we've done two things. One, from the, we call it the Wyoming Innovation Partnership. We have one university, which is nice in some ways, that you have a bunch of them, and we have community colleges. We've tried to align those to be able to do a couple of things. Research, there should be a track from the community colleges all the way to whatever the highest research, and there's some really great stuff going on with reservoir engineering and so on at the university. So how can we get that there? If you're losing your job, and believe me, even in mining today, I hope you would tell me the technology is changing, so the jobs are not absolute. They're going to change. They're going to evolve, and that's actually kind of exciting. So we wanted to make sure that we could meet the education needs of a population. I hate training. I don't like training, because we're not talking about dogs. We're talking about people, and so we wanted to be able to meet the education needs as people are wanting to get that and have that completely there. At the grade school, K-12 level, we also just backed that down and said, okay, rather than going with whatever anybody is saying in the think tanks, let's start at the base. Let's ask the students, the teachers, the parents, the communities, and the businesses to come together and find out what makes sense in terms of educating the kids. Now, I can tell you it's been so fascinating, because every school has been a little bit different. The great thing for the teachers is it's a little bit of a challenge. We don't necessarily have the same metric we used to, so it's not just a test that we memorize the night before and forget the day after. We have to prove that we can actually use what we've learned. So then how do you grade mastery? So that's been a challenge for the teachers, which they're liking. And for the students, they're engaged. We have a real reduction in truancy. We have better grades. Kids aren't sitting there just seats and chairs. They're actually engaged. In fact, one of the schools we have has completely re-engineered their entire schedule so that the kids can take the course when they have the opportunity. So if they have a bunch of electives, or they're doing a science project, as long as they're caught up on something, they can take the whole day to finish the science project. I mean, it's just created a whole bunch of flexibility that we would love to see expressed now kind of more nationally.
Good lessons for Colorado. Thank you, Governor. Let's have a hand for the governor. Thank you. And Kelly's going to finish up for us. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Caulfield. I'm the Executive Director of the Common Sense Institute here in Colorado, and we're just so incredibly proud of this program tonight. Thank you again, Governor for being here. Thank you for all being here. Just a few quick items from me. First, if you liked our program, we have another opportunity in June 3rd. Right here, same space, different time, we will be doing Eggs in the Economy, 7:30 in the morning. This is our legislative recap. We'll be hosting Senator Kirkmeyer here, Representative Shannon Byrd, as well as our homelessness fellow, Dustin Zvonek, who will be doing a deep dive on Common Sense's most recent report on the state of homelessness in Colorado. So please join us. You can RSVP on our website or take a quick picture of that QR code. I also wanted to just take a moment and tell you about an institute that we launched last year. About this time, Common Sense launched something called the Center on Energy and Our Environment. And we have done over 5 research projects since that research institute was launched. It really allows us to continue to do the good work we do, nonpartisan, objective. We're an honest broker. We're not a part of any single trade association. So that allows us to analyze work, I think, in a very objective way. I'm going to ask that we show a quick video of our work. And I also just wanted to thank the Colorado Mining Association and COGA, Colorado Oil and Gas Association, for sponsoring today. I love the little boy at the end holding up his arm, looking for a better future. So thank you again so much for being here today. If you like the work that you saw today, if you like more common sense research, please consider a donation to the Common Sense Institute. We are nonprofit. We are 501c3. We rely on the generosity of people like you to continue to do this work. We've just started with that energy center. We want to do more. And I really like Governor Gordon's recap of how we can talk about these issues. Lead with credibility, lead with things that can actually work, and lead with common sense. So please help us support more common sense here in Colorado, and have a good night. Thank you.